Let me guess. You grew up in a home where someone always exploded. So you learned to tiptoe. You grew up in a home where emotions were dangerous. So now every time you feel something deep, you panic. You weren't taught to regulate. You were trained to suppress. And you were told it was the adult thing to do. But here's the punchline. Emotionally mature people don't avoid emotions. They walk straight into the fire and stand there, without flinching, without blaming, without running, because they know the emotion isn't the enemy, the reaction is. And if your first instinct is to lash out, ghost, collapse, manipulate, perform, then guess what? You're not emotionally immature, you're emotionally unconscious. And that's exactly how they want you to stay. See, a person disconnected from their emotions is a puppet, a walking shell that performs, obeys, and self-destructs on command. You think you're controlling your emotions? No, you're just suppressing them long enough for them to erupt later, at the worst time, to the wrong person, in the most destructive way. Because the truth is, the calm you're chasing isn't peace. It's paralysis. The version of maturity you've been sold is just silence with better PR. It's numbness dressed as strength. It's trauma with a tie. They told you to breathe, to count to 10, to choose your response. But no one taught you what to do when your body doesn't feel safe. When your nervous system is screaming but your mouth smiles anyway. When your hands are shaking but your voice stays polite. That's not maturity. That's self-abandonment. You want to grow up emotionally? You want to actually mature? Then stop trying to be a better version of yourself and start unlearning the broken emotional wiring you never asked for. Because emotional maturity isn't calm, it's clarity. It's feeling everything without losing yourself in the storm. And until you stop performing peace, you'll never experience real power, not the kind that controls others, but the kind that doesn't collapse when the past comes knocking, the kind that can sit in the fire of anger, grief, shame, and not run. That's when you know you're not their puppet anymore. They say you overreact, but nobody ever asked, what's the wound behind the reaction? See, the emotionally immature mind fixates on volume. You're too loud, you're too sensitive, you need to let it go. But the emotionally mature mind asks, why did that moment feel like life or death? Why did being ignored feel like abandonment? Why did that one comment break something in you that's been cracked for years? Because here's the secret. You don't react to what's in front of you. You react to everything it reminds you of. Every look, every silence, every dismissal, every tiny rupture echoes something deeper, something older, something you never got to finish feeling. Emotional maturity isn't about staying collected when your nervous system is in flames. It's about recognizing this feeling isn't new. It's just loud. And when you stop running from it, you meet the origin story of every breakdown you've ever had. That's when you start to see it. You weren't angry at your friend. You were angry at your father. You weren't afraid to lose your partner. You were reliving the moment your mother left. You weren't just jealous. You were feeling invisible again, like you did every day growing up. And that's when it clicks. You weren't emotionally weak. You were emotionally overloaded. From years of unprocessed grief, buried rage, chronic invalidation, and every outburst wasn't just a meltdown, it was a memory leak. You want to mature emotionally? Then stop asking how to stay calm and start asking what parts of you are still screaming to be seen. Because here's what they won't tell you. Your emotions are smart, smarter than your rational mind. They carry truths your ego can't digest. Truths like, you were neglected, you were never safe, you had to earn love you should have received freely. And those truths, they hurt. So your brain calls them overreactions, drama, childish. But the truth doesn't care about your image. It doesn't care about your job, your car, your reputation. It only cares about healing. And healing begins where pretending ends. So stop trying to be the emotionally stable robot you think the world wants. Start being honest about how much it hurt, about how often you still cry in secret, about how your jokes are really trauma in disguise, about how your independence is just fear of disappointment. Because emotional maturity isn't about being unshakable. It's about being real, even when it makes others uncomfortable. You want to know what emotional immaturity looks like? It's the grown man who shuts down every time he's criticized. It's the woman who turns cold the second she's triggered. It's the friend who disappears every time you ask for more. It's the boss who confuses authority with control. It's the influencer who preaches healing while ghosting accountability. We praise these people. We say they're stoic, strong, high value. No, they're just emotionally stunted with better lighting. But truly mature ones, they apologize when they snap. They name their triggers. They lean in when it's hard. They sit with guilt. They confront their shame. They stay even when their inner child wants to run. Because they know every reaction is a messenger. And until you read the message, you're doomed to send the same reply. Sabotage, withdrawal, destruction. But once you listen, really listen, you reclaim what was taken, your power, your presence, your choice. So don't tell me how calm you are. Show me what you do when the panic hits, when the old wounds open, when love triggers fear, when silence feels like punishment, when everything in you wants to run but you don't. That's not just maturity, that's rebirth. And most people never make it there. You know what's terrifying? How many people think they're healing just because they've learned to suppress faster? They call it control. They call it peace. They call it being above the drama. No, it's emotional bypassing in designer clothes. You didn't evolve. You disconnected from your anger, your grief, your deepest unmet needs. Let me ask you something. Who taught you that your feelings are a problem? That being too emotional means you're weak? That crying is embarrassing? That needing someone makes you clingy? I'll tell you who. The emotionally unavailable parents. The emotionally detached teachers. The emotionally numb culture that sells you self-control but punishes self-expression. Welcome to America, where emotional shutdown is a survival tactic and the mask of being fine is worshipped like a god. But here's what they don't want you to notice. The people who preach positive vibes only, they're falling apart inside. The people who tell you, don't take it personally, they haven't had an authentic relationship in years. The ones who say, you're too intense, they've never faced their own truth for longer than a second. Because facing it, really facing it, means admitting, I'm still wounded. I still carry that moment when they left. I still flinch when someone raises their voice. I still go numb when I feel unwanted. I still overthink texts because I don't believe I'm safe. That's not drama. That's your nervous system screaming. We haven't processed this, but instead of listening, you perform sanity. You perform adulthood. You perform stoicism. You quote mindfulness like it's scripture, but you don't even know how to feel without panicking. And then you wonder why your relationships implode, why your partner says you're distant, why your friends feel unheard, why every apology you give feels empty. It's because you're acting stable, not being whole. Emotional maturity isn't about perfect behavior. It's about congruence. Do your actions match your emotions? Do your words match your wounds? Do you actually feel what you claim to understand? Because most people, they intellectualize emotions they've never truly touched. They read a book on trauma and start diagnosing everyone. They watch a TED Talk on shame and think they've healed theirs. They memorize attachment styles but can't hold space when their partner cries. That's not maturity. That's performance. And it's fragile. You want to see real maturity? Watch the person who says, I was wrong, and doesn't make it about their childhood. Watch the person who cries and stays connected, who's angry and still chooses kindness, who gets triggered and doesn't project it onto you. That's rare. That's power. That's the kind of emotional weight most people can't lift, because you can't fake this. You can't shortcut this. You either feel it or you fracture from it, and the world is full of fractured people calling themselves healed. So I'll ask you again, are you managing your emotions? Or are you just avoiding the ones that scare you? Because real maturity means letting them surface. The guilt, the rage, the shame, the fear that you'll always be too much for the people you love. And then, holding yourself through it. Not fixing, just feeling. Because when you stop trying to silence the storm, you finally hear the message underneath it. And that's where the real work begins. Let me show you the trap you've been walking into for decades. It's not your emotions that ruin your life. It's how quickly you abandon yourself the second they show up. You get angry and you shame yourself. You get jealous and you call yourself crazy. You feel sad and you immediately try to fix it. You've been trained like a dog. react, suppress, smile, repeat. Because somewhere along the way someone taught you that emotions are either a threat or a liability. So you treat them like enemies. You try to outthink them, outlogic them, outbreathe them. You call it self-regulation. But it's not. It's emotional warfare. And guess who the battlefield is? You. And here's the sinister part. Society rewards this. You get praised for being calm under pressure. You get raises for never losing your cool. You get liked for being chill and low drama. But no one sees the cost. The insomnia. The anxiety disguised as productivity. The emotional constipation you wear like a medal. And worst of all, the death of your intuition. Because when you override your feelings long enough, you stop trusting your inner compass. You stay in relationships that rot your soul. You tolerate jobs that bleed you dry. You say yes when your whole body is screaming no. But hey, at least you're not emotional, right? Let me rip that mask off. Emotional maturity doesn't mean staying calm. It means staying connected. Connected to your body when it wants to shut down. Connected to your fear when it wants to lash out. Connected to your inner child when they just want to scream, "Please don't leave me again." You think strength is silence. No, strength is staying present when everything inside you wants to run. And you know what really separates the emotionally immature from the mature? The immature blame the trigger. The mature investigate the wound. The immature say, "She made me mad." The mature say, "Her words touch something I haven't healed yet." The immature escape. Scroll, smoke, drink, joke, distract. The mature sit in the fire until it teaches them what they need to know. So here's a question that'll expose where you really are. When was the last time you let yourself fully feel, without rushing to fix it, without turning it into a productivity lesson, without making it someone else's fault? Most people can't answer that, because most people haven't felt in years. They've managed, they've coped, they've stayed functional, but they haven't felt. They've confused numbness with peace, silence with healing, distance with wisdom. But none of those are real. They're just evidence of how far you've drifted from your own humanity. Because to be human is to be messy, inconsistent, triggered, hungry for love in all the wrong places. And maturity? It's not the end of that. It's the witnessing of that, without judgment, without running, without fixing, without calling it bad. It's saying, yes, I feel rage right now, and I'm still worthy. Yes, I'm spiraling right now, and I'm still safe. Yes, I'm scared out of my mind, and I can hold myself through it. That's not weakness, that's mastery. Not because the feelings went away, but because you stopped abandoning yourself every time they showed up. And the moment you do that, you become the kind of person no one taught you how to be, but always wished existed. The one who doesn't run, the one who doesn't flinch, the one who stays. Here's the punchline no one wants to hear. The reason you can't grow is because you still think your emotions are problems to solve, instead of messages to receive. You treat sadness like a glitch, anger like a flaw, fear like a virus. But what if they're none of those? What if sadness is just your soul telling you where the love isn't? What if anger is your boundaries screaming to be heard? What if fear is just the part of you that doesn't want to be hurt again? You weren't born emotionally immature. You were just never taught emotional fluency. You were handed a broken language, a language of suppression, shame, and silence. So now, every time something real shows up, you censor it like it's dangerous. But here's the brutal truth. Whatever you repress eventually becomes your personality. Suppress your grief long enough, you become numb. Bury your rage, you become chill. Hide your fear, you become a rational adult who secretly panics when alone. And we applaud that. We call it maturity. But it's not maturity. It's just trauma, dressed in business casual. You want to be emotionally mature, then stop performing, stop managing, stop turning your healing into another to-do list. Maturity isn't sterile. So it's not about becoming zen. It's about becoming real. And real people? They break down. They cry at gas stations. They yell when the past comes back in a flash. They hold their wounds with tender rage. Because emotional maturity isn't clean. It's honest. And when you finally stop running from your emotions, you start realizing something terrifying and beautiful. They were never there to hurt you. They were you, trying to come home. And the more you try to control them, the more you lose yourself. But the moment you listen, really listen, your entire inner world shifts. You're no longer at war. You're no longer performing sanity for a world that rewards insanity. You're just here, present, bleeding, breathing, alive. Not fixed, but whole. And that's what they never told you. The goal isn't to feel better. The goal is to feel fully. That's emotional maturity, and it doesn't look good on paper. It looks human, raw, messy, unapologetic, exactly what you were always meant to be.